Hey everybody, how y'all doing today? Cardboard Apothecary here. Going to be going over one of my favorite commander decks I have made. It is a Jund commander by the name of the Beamtown Bullies. Vigilance Haste, 4/4, tap, target opponent whose turn it is puts target non-legendary creature card from your graveyard onto the battlefield under their control. It gains haste, goad it at the beginning of the next end step, exile it. So, y'all already may be thinking, who picks the target card? That would be you. That would be whoever is controlling Beamtown. So, it's not target opponent, okay, I choose player 2, and then player 2 gets to pick a card out of my graveyard and put it on the battlefield under their control. Like, no, that doesn't work. It's not how it works. I pick the target opponent, and I pick the target card. Or whoever's playing Beamtown. That's who picks it, okay? Which makes this deck very, very salt-inducing for people. So you could play Beamtown two different ways. You could play him as a group hug and make everybody happy and not be salt-inducing, and have ETBs like, when this card enters, search your library for a basic land. When this card enters, draw a card, stuff like that. Or you can play it the way I've chosen to play it, which is a dastardly, diabolical way. Basically, this focuses on reanimating cards that, if played in a normal deck, seem pointless or what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. I'm going to give up on trying to think of that one. Contradictory, I guess, to what you would be normally trying to do. So, for example, I only have 8 bullies in here, aside from Beamtown, but boy, are they nasty. So I have Eater of Days. When it comes into play, you skip your next 2 turns. I have Hellcarver Demon. When Hellcarver Demon deals combat damage to a player, it's a flyer, by the way. Sacrifice all other permanents you control and discard your hand. Exile the top 6 cards of your library. You may cast any number of spells from among cards exiled this way without paying their mana costs. Okay, so already, Hellcarver is more of a situational type. You don't want to play it early on before people have a lot of board state built up, because it might actually backfire on you if they end up hitting a top 6 that are really powerful. You kind of want to play it more so in the middle to late game, once they have board states built up and they've played a lot of their good cards, so you're not worried about them hitting them in the top 6, and then you just exile everything, including their lands. Inverter of Truth is a good one. When this creature enters, exile all cards from your library face down, then shuffle all cards from your graveyard into your library. So if you hit somebody with this early on, before they have a graveyard built up, they're pretty much done for the game, because their deck's going to be exiled and they're not going to have a graveyard to take the place of their library. Then my personal favorite, Leveler. Just straight to the point. When this creature enters, exile all cards from your library. That's a nasty one. And it's a 10/10, by the way. So, it's a pretty salt-inducing card right here. Then I have Pathrazor. I mainly just have this in here so that it's a card that I can play if I needed a card. But it's also a beefy boy to hit somebody with bullies, because it has Annihilator 3, can't be blocked by more than 3 creatures, and it's a 9/9. The only thing it's missing is Trample. Then there's Sire of Insanity, which I have in here just for chaotic reasons. At the beginning of each end step, each player discards their hand. The group that I play with, boy, do they run a ton of card advantage, and it can get out of hand pretty quickly. So I like to have this in there, not only because it feeds my graveyard, which I'm playing out of my graveyard, obviously, but it also handicaps them by making them discard at the end of every turn. Then Soulgorger Org, the last 2 actually, Soulgorger Org and World Gorger Dragon, the Gorgers. So they, on the surface level, don't really do much. You might be wondering why I have them in here. But the trick with these cards is they have 2 different things that resolve given certain situations. One is when they come into play, and another is when they leave play. So the trick with these 2 cards is to destroy them before the ETB resolves. So, for example, when Soulgorger Org comes into play, you lose all but 1 life. So say I hit player 2 with Soulgorger, and they go down to 1 life, okay? Well, at the end of the turn, I mean, Soul Gorger is going to get exiled, and they're going to get their life back based off the second condition. But the thing is if you destroy Soul Gorger before step 1 resolves, then that means step 2 is going to be on top of the stack. So they're going to gain life, but there's not going to be any life to gain because step 1 hasn't resolved yet. And then it's going to resolve afterwards, and they're going to go down to 1 life. And they're going to stay there. Because you already destroyed it, it already left the board. So then you just got to hit them with a 1/1 flyer or an unblockable or something like a lightning bolt. Boom, they're out of the game. World Gorger happens the same way. If you destroy it before step 1 resolves, then step 2 will be on top of the stack and nothing will get returned because step 1 hasn't resolved yet. So it essentially wipes everything from the player who you give it to as long as you destroy it before step 1 occurs. And it even exiles it, and it takes away their lands. Nasty business. Now, in order to make sure this happens and as fast as possible, I loaded it up with a lot of card draw, discard. So basically things like Avaricious Dragon. At the beginning of your draw step, you draw an additional card, but then you discard your hand at the end. So I'm drawing more cards and I'm discarding more into my graveyard. It means I'm going to get the cards I'm looking for, aka the bullies, faster. Azra Oddsmaker, very similar card. You can discard a card at the beginning of combat. If you do, choose a creature. Whenever it deals damage to a player this turn, you draw 2 cards. Then there's things like Big Score, Cathartic Pyre, Cathartic Reunion, Demand Answers, Faithless Looting, Faithless Salvaging. And then I even have Fauna Shaman in here under discard because you discard a creature, and but it is a tutor. I don't know if I have it on my tutor side actually, but it's a way. So say I have a bully in my hand, and I don't have any of these other ones. Fauna Shaman is able to give me another way to discard the card into the graveyard, so I can play it with Beamtown. Montsalantly, which also transforms into a pretty beefy mana generator. But the primary goal of it is to draw a card, discard a card, tap. Then there's Palantir, which is a beautiful card. I love it. I love Lord of the Rings, so obviously I had to include it in here. It not only allows you to scry 2, but it also allows you to potentially draw a card. And if you don't draw, then you mill, which is just feeding the graveyard once again. And on top of that, the player that had you mill instead of draw loses life equal to the total mana value of those cards. So more than likely people have you draw. So just different ways, basically I found the most efficient method with this deck is to play a bunch of draw and discard, draw and discard, draw and discard. It allows you to select, if you draw a bully, it allows you to get it out of your hand, draw more stuff like removal, draw more stuff like protection, because in this deck you're going to need a lot of protection, because like I said earlier, once people catch on to it, they start removing Beamtown like crazy. So I have a lot of cards in here for protection to keep that from happening, at least as much as possible. Then obviously I have some dorks, got a little bit of ramp, Sakura Tribe Elder, Nature's Lore 3 visits, dorks, Birds of Paradise, Ignoble Hierarch, Skull Prophet. I'm sure some people would say you need more dorks or you need more ramp or whatever. I'm not going ultra competitive with this deck, so I'm not going to load it up all the talismans and all the things like that. I'm not going to load up all the staples of dorks and ramps. Like basically, I just want just enough to get me where I need to go. Because really, once this deck hits 4 or 5 mana, you're good to go. You don't really need much more than that, because everything that costs a lot, like Hellcarver Demon, Leveler, or I guess that's 5 mana, Pathraiser, Sire of Insanity, Soul Gorger, World Gorger, you're not actually casting these cards, you're just reanimating them. And you only need 4 mana to do that with Beamtown, assuming it doesn't get removed. Once it gets removed and you start having the mana tax placed, then you get into a different situation. But if you're able to keep it alive or you're able to time it right, you don't got to worry about the mana tax, and you can just keep getting people. Because a trick with this deck, not only is the trick, because see, okay, so with Soul Gorger and World Gorger, I talked about how the trick was to destroy them before they resolve, right? Well, that's kind of what you're doing with all the bullies. You want to destroy them before the last step of Beamtown takes place, where it gets exiled. If it does get exiled, it's okay. You still have other bullies in here, plus a Rift Sweeper, which Rift Sweeper isn't a highly played card except in decks like this. When this creature enters, choose target face-up exiled card. Its owner shuffles it into their library. So if you hit somebody with Leveler on T4, and then you get Rift Sweeper a few turns later, you can return Leveler to your deck. But it's still in your deck. You got to draw it again. You got to tutor it again. Whatever. But it's still a nice little backup. Now I do have a decent amount of graveyard tutors in here, or just straight up mill that will feed my graveyard. So things like Breach the Multiverse, Buried Alive, Corpse Connoisseur, Entomb, which Entomb's really nice because it's instant speed. So people will start paying attention to your graveyard a lot, and they'll start exiling your graveyard and things like that, obviously. But Entomb, you can play during the end step of the person who goes before you, and there's not as much of a chance that somebody's going to be able to remove whatever you put in your graveyard at that point. And then it's your turn, and you can hit them with it. Final Parting, Goblin Engineer, which may seem like, why would you want Goblin Engineer? Because it just has artifact card. But the thing is Eater of Days and Leveler are artifacts. And those are the two nastiest ones, in my opinion, outside of Inverter of Truth, but it's not an artifact. But Leveler and Eater of Days are artifacts, so it's just more tutoring. Gravebreaker Lamia, Jared's Orders, Lively Dirge, Old Stick Fingers, just as a backup in case Beamtown keeps getting removed. This will at least give you a beefy boy to put on the board. Auric Lore Mage, tap, search your library for a card, put it into your graveyard. Which, once again, I mean, you could kind of beef him up if you choose instants or sorceries. If Beamtown, is getting mana taxed too high. Unmarked Grave, Vile Entomber. Then I have regular tutors like Vampiric Tutor and Worldly Tutor in here. Mana Rocks, yeah, I know it's weak. I'm only going Arcane Signet and Soul Ring. There's places for talismans in here, things like that. You could totally do that in your own version of this deck. You may see cards already that you want to remove. You may say, man, he's got too much removal in there. He's got too many tutors, like whatever. Let me add some Mana Rocks. You could definitely do that. I just know the group that I play with. They run a bunch of stacks. They run a bunch of just BS. So I have a lot of removal, not only for that, but also for the cards I'm going to be playing and putting on their side of the board so that I can destroy them. Because, see, that's the trick. If you destroy it before Beamtown fully resolves, it doesn't get exiled. It goes to the graveyard. And then if you have a way to untap the bullies, you can just hit the next person with it on their turn. Which I do have some ways to do that. So obviously, here's protection and all that stuff with, Will's Reversal, Collective Resistance, Demonic Gifts, Heroic Intervention, Lightning Greaves. These are all pretty common staples here. Return the Favor, Revitalizing Repass, which is also at land, Snakeskin Veil, Swiftfoot Boots, Tamiyo's Safekeeping, Tybalt's Trickery, things like this to just redirect certain spells or just straight up protect my bullies. But now this gets more into so let's get more to the untappers here. So we have Mage Right Stone, pay 1, tap it, untap target creature that has an activated ability with tap in its cost. So that's Beamtown. But it does only work one time, and then you gotta wait for your next turn. Patriarch Seal, add 1 mana of any color, so that's nice. 1 of any color tap, untap target legendary creature you control, which is Beamtown. But once again, that only works for one turn. Sereth, the Viper's Fang, one of any color, tap, untap another target creature or land you control. So once again, that's only for one turn because she'll be tapped, but it's at least ways to get Beamtown to hit 2 people in one turn instead of just one. And the thing about Beamtown is, you know, if you're able to keep untapping it, I mean, and you have your graveyard set up, say you're player 1, you could literally hit player 2 on their turn, untap, hit player 3 on their turn, untap, hit player 4 on their turn, and then you win on your next turn. I mean, that's the ideal scenario. And then I have Sting, which is probably the best untapper I have on here. At the beginning of each combat, untap equipped creature. So this would allow you to hit everybody in one turn. There's other cards that untap as well. But really, these are the ones I narrowed it down to because I found them to be the most useful, just based off like mana cost and everything. But there are other untappers you can look into, and there's also spells like a lot of green spells will untap a target creature, so you could also look at running those. I forget some of their names though, but it'll be like untap target creature, give it +3/+3, things like that. So you could also run stuff like that in here. I found with the group that I played with, it was best for me to run a ton of protection and a ton of removal, because if you run the protection, you're able to survive turns as opposed to trying to untap, hit somebody, because there's also a lot of conditions for untapping. You got to have the card you want to hit them with in the graveyard, etc. So I think with my group, it's been best to run protection and removal, but I'm sure some of y'all could think of better ways to synergize this, etc. But that's pretty much it as far as this deck goes. I mean, I can go over removal, I guess. Assassin's Trophy, destroy a target permanent opponent controls. Then there's obviously Bane of Progress, Bitter Triumph. Cathartic Pyre is mainly using it as a draw engine, but you can use it to deal 3 damage if there's something low on the board. Collective Resistance, destroy artifact or enchantment, but then you can also use it to gain hexproof and indestructible. I do have a board wipe and Damnation on here. Then there's Despotic Scepter, which is kind of an older card, but you tap it, bury target permanent you own, which is nice because it's a way to just repeatedly destroy your own creatures you're given. So if you have Despotic Scepter on the board and you give somebody Inverter of Truth, you can hit them with that, and then you can let them attack somebody because it's goated, hit them for 6, and then you can just Despotic Scepter it, goes into your graveyard before it gets exiled, untap Beamtown, hit somebody else with Inverter of Truth. I've had games where I've hit the same person with Eater of Days like 2 or 3 times, and they lost 4 to 6 turns, and it pretty much took them out of the game because I was able to just Despotic Scepter every time it came onto the board. Fell to Profane, doubles as a land, destroy target creature, Planeswalker, go for the throat. The only thing that sucks about that is I couldn't use it against Eater of Days or Leveler because they're artifacts, but other than that, it's good to go. Infernal Grasp, Lightning Bolt, I really only have in here. Just because of the versatility, any target, but I really have it in here for Soulgorger Orc, because if I'm able to hit somebody with that, I can then hit them with Lightning Bolt to finish them off. Putrefy, and then Staff of Completion does the same thing as the Despotic Scepter. Pay 1 life, destroy target permanent you own. So, things like that. You want to keep Beamtown on the board as much as possible. Obviously, you want to keep your graveyard alive as much as possible, so you can maybe look into graveyard protection spells. You could look into adding more bullies if that's something you're into, but the thing is if you keep adding bullies, you're eventually going to hit a spot where you're drawing too many of these cards, and you don't have, other cards in your hand to get them out of your hands, like the draw discard down here. So there's definitely a balance to it, as there is with all decks. But overall, I mean, that's the gist of this deck. You just want to get Beamtown on the board. Once you have a couple bullies in the graveyard, and then you just want to start hitting your table mates with whatever you got going on in there. And if you have something that untaps Beamtown, even better, because then you can hit 2 people in one turn before you go again, especially if you have removal. So like say the only card I have in my graveyard is Leveler, but say I have Infernal Grasp in my hand and Beamtown on the board, along with it being equipped with Sting. I mean, if I had enough removal, I could literally hit everybody at the table with Leveler in one go round. Because player two's turn, leveled, destroyed. Player three's turn, untap, leveled, destroyed. Player four's turn, untap, leveled, destroyed. So if you're able to find ways to consistently do something like that, I mean, you could even remove some of these bullies, to be honest. Like Sire of Insanity, Pathrazor, Hellcarver Demon, like you could remove these 3 guys. Well, I say guys, they're definitely not guys though. But you know what I mean. You could remove those 3, add 3 elsewhere, or you could add more mana rocks, more dorks, more ramp, whatever you wanted to do. But that's kind of just the gist of this deck. I also have Bala Ged in here, doubles as a land, and it also returns a card from your graveyard to your hand. You wanna basically start the game off with some kind of draw engine in your hand. Hopefully you get a bully or 2 in your hands. You're able to play a draw engine, discard the bully, get more lands or mana or whatever. Eventually play Beamtown, T3 or T4, depending on what your dork and ramp situation is, and then hit somebody, with the bully that you just discarded on the previous turn. That's kind of the gist of it. Then you protect Beamtown. Hopefully you pull another tutor or another draw engine, and just rinse, repeat. So it is a pretty easy deck to run once you get used to the way the bullies work and everything. But at the same time, it's also somewhat easy to shut down because if somebody plays something that keeps you from being able to reanimate things from the graveyard, or if they're able to successfully remove Beamtown every time it comes on the board, it's just going to be too expensive to play eventually. Which is why I have cards like Old Stick Fingers and Pathrazor in here. It's kind of like alternate ways to win, even though if I'm shut down that much by stacks in my graveyard and stacks in my commander by way of a mana tax, I still have somewhat of a backup, even if it's not the best. But that is pretty much it. I appreciate you if you made it all the way through. I can ramble pretty hard. Like and subscribe if you want. No pressure though. I'm not going to be one of those people. And have a good one.